Hello. So we're going to be talking about online IEP meetings today. So what's your favorite beverage for drinking so you're ready to be at that online meeting? Or what is your favorite beverage to drink for IEP recovery? Now, hopefully with our tips today, your next online meeting won't be as scary or worrisome, and that you will actually get a lot accomplished at your online meeting. So welcome. If you have been to an online meeting this spring, let us know in the comments, say hi. Also, if you did have that online IEP meeting, let us know how it went. Because today we'll be talking about tech do's and don'ts, how to prepare for that online meeting, do's and don'ts, what to do during the meeting, and what kind of follow-up. So we've got 4 different categories that we're going to be talking about today. And Marie says that she has one next month, and her favorite IEP prep beverage is coffee. Yes, something with caffeine, right? And then I think her favorite recovery IEP drink is Chardonnay. So we have to keep a sense of humor. We have to know that we have each other's backs, right? So let's see, Vicki says, IEP went fine as we have reviewed the draft thoroughly and sent in questions in advance. Yes, so a lot of the same good strategies that you use for your typical IEP meeting where you're face-to-face apply when you are going to online meetings. So I got this microphone here. We're going to start out with one of Michael Giangreco's cartoons. And here are 2 exhausted parents. And they're talking about how home programming collides with home reality. And I can't actually see. Let me see what the dad is saying here. We made it through another busy day. Work, dinner, the kids home, homework, dishes, laundry, bills paid, the kids' baths, bedtime stories. And the mom is like, oh no, we forgot to do the home therapy program and to work on IEP goals. So how many of you are finding yourself trying to balance all of these things, right? And then looking at the technology that's going to be happening when you do your online meetings, I think that probably the 3 most popular platforms are Zoom, Google Hangouts, and Microsoft Teams. So if you've been using one of those platforms for your child to connect with their teacher, hopefully that will be the same platform and it will be less of a learning curve, right, to figure out the technology. But let's look at some of the do's that you can do. And our first one is take a deep breath. And know you can figure this out and it's going to be okay. I do live videos on Facebook every week, and it still can be intimidating when you have to start using a new platform. Like Zoom, I was used to as a participant. When I had to lead a Zoom meeting, it was like totally different, right? So know that it's going to be okay. Know that you're going to figure it out and all will work. Just keep your fingers crossed. So the other tip that I have for online meetings is to ask people to have their camera on. And I know sometimes, it's much easier if you have that Post-it note above your camera there and you don't appear on the screen. But it really helps to be able to pick up body language, and it just makes the connections better if you have everybody turn their camera on, and don't feel like you have to be all dressed up, to do this. But it is important that you see each other face to face, because that body language can really be helpful as you're trying to figure out if people are agreeing with you, if there's disagreement. You do want to record the meeting, and if you are in a two-party state, of course, then you need to get permission from the school staff. But if you're in a one-party state, still tell them ahead of time that you want to record it. Most of the platforms that schools are using will have the ability to record the meeting. What you need to know is they're recording not just the audio like we usually do when we record meetings, but they're going to be recording the whole video. And just so you know that. And usually you can, ask the school for a link so you also have the video record. But as a backup, I always suggest that you also record. What I usually do is use my phone, r.ai. I can put that in the comments. And it not only records your meeting, but also gives you a free transcript. So that's something that can be really useful too. So go ahead and plan on recording those meetings, and I'll plan on showing you the slide. The other thing is to make sure your phone or your tablet or your computer, whatever you're using, is fully charged and hopefully even plugged in, because using, your phone for video, it just drains so much more of the battery. So that's another tip that you can remember. So what techie tips have helped you? I know a few people in the group have said that they have already been to, experienced a virtual meeting. And so what does it look like for you guys? Has it been easy to get on? Is it a challenge? Sometimes it's good to have an alternative so everybody has, phone numbers, and you can make a conference call in case like the Zoom goes down or something like that. But what techie tips do you have for us? And we're going to go on with some don'ts. Oops. Let's see if we can get this to work. So you've probably heard of some Zoom meetings that have gone bad. So let me see if I stop this screen share and instead I go to this screen share. We have like a minute YouTube video here for our pleasure.
Hope you guys saw. See you guys.
You see it?
Tony!
Can you see it?
Tony! Oh no! Oh, Jen, call him. Oh my gosh!
Can you see the guy there in his boxer shorts?
Oh.
So.
Oh boy.
What's up?
Tony, I can see you. We can all see you.
So the other tip is not to appear in just your boxer shorts if you have to get up and go get something. So all of those little tips, right? And we've got some other questions in here. So Anne-Marie says, our school hasn't canceled yet for the rest of the year. I'm concerned about e-learning again in the future and if I need to be prepared. I considered my daughter to be in a high-risk group, so I would not send her to school if there's another outbreak while school is in session. Yeah, Anne Marie, and I think you're in South Carolina. I think the reality is most schools are going to be closed for the rest of the year. And I think some schools are already looking at doing distance learning for any students that need to have extended school year this summer. So chances are, that this is going to continue for a while. And that's why we want to have good communication with our teams, because we need to keep track of what's working and what's not working, right? Carolyn is here and she says, what if the school is not doing meetings now? What language should I use to get them to meet? So that's a great question. So yeah, so you would want to request an IEP meeting like you would, anytime during the school year when you've got questions, when things, have come up, and you're considering maybe making some changes. So I would send just a simple email to the special ed teacher and copy the special ed director of your district and just say, I'm requesting a virtual IEP meeting for my child. And these are the concerns that I have. These are the items that I think it would be beneficial for the whole team to discuss. So make a specific request that you want to have this virtual IEP meeting. You can also suggest a timeline, like, please respond within, the next 3 to 5 business days so we can come up with a mutually acceptable time for the meeting. But yeah, just make a simple email requesting that you have that IEP meeting. We want to make sure that we're staying in touch with our teams. And Laura says, my son has his IEP meeting 1 week from today using Zoom. It will be my first time using Zoom. How many people can appear on the screen? Good question. We will have about 14 people attending. Yeah, so Laura, you can Zoom. I forget exactly how many, but I'm sure at least 14 people can be on the gallery view on one page. If you have dozens of people, then you usually have to have a second page. But you can get everybody's, and there'll be little pictures, almost like a Brady Bunch kind of thing, with their pictures. And like I said, I think it's good ahead of time to ask that people have their video cameras on, even if they're little pictures. It's still, to me, it's nice to still be able to see those faces. And Zoom is pretty easy. And the other thing, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, is asking for, the teacher to give you some tips or signing on a little bit early before the IEP meeting so you can try it out and just get kind of the lay of the land. Michelle says, have a good idea. Practice with the team to make sure everyone is familiar with the tech. Granted, internet connections are slower and have crashed now and then. Yes, I mean, you look at all the people that are home using the internet these days, right? But yeah, that's a great tip, is to just sign on early, or you can have a practice one and it's, the day before the meeting, and you and the teacher are on there and she can show you, where you can type questions. She can show you where you turn your microphone on and off. It's pretty easy once you've done it. But I think in order to feel real confident, you might want to try and do it ahead of time. Carolyn says it was scheduled in 24 hours before the meeting. They canceled due to the pandemic. Safety was the issue. I wrote back and said that if we had to do it with safety, I reminded them that my kids are using Zoom and we could too. They were steadfast and said, due to the staff teaching, their family, there will not be IEP meetings till notice is given. Is this awful? Well, it depends, right? As most things in life, it depends. How satisfied are you with what your child's getting now for the distance learning plan? I would definitely keep copies of that email correspondence where you requested it and the district denied it. The other thing that you could do, and it just depends on your relationship with the staff and everything, but one of the things that you could do is to email them back and talk about why you think it's important. What are the topics that you want discussed at the IEP meeting? And ask that they give you a prior written notice as far as a response. And the prior written notice is just another paper trail, part of your paper trail that you might want. It talks about what you requested. You requested the IEP meeting, what the district considered when they were making their decision, what decision they made, if they're going to schedule one or not, why they made that decision. So asking for a prior written notice when what you request is denied is always a good kind of habit. So she's wondering if it's lawful. And I'm not an attorney, so I can't give you any legal advice. There is guidance, and I can put the link in here afterwards. There is guidance from the U.S. Department of Ed encouraging school districts to go ahead and have IEP meetings. But I wouldn't be able to say whether or not it's lawful for them not to have the meeting. I think your best bet is to ask for a prior written notice, so they have to give you an explanation. And then if you need that later on, you've got that in your paperwork. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Laura. Glad you guys are here. So let's look at some of the don'ts for technology. So I need to share my PowerPoint again. So let's see where we are. Where are we? Okay, so one of the struggles, I need to take down Laura's comment there, is, that struggle with the tech part. So like we have said, ask the teacher if you can do it ahead of time. And get some practice in. And Sherry has a good comment. She says there's been issues with Zoom bombing that is impacting safety. Many schools are using different platforms or having to purchase the more protected version of Zoom. Yes, and that's what I did is I recently purchased Zoom, and there are now, I think, because of all the Zoom bombing and people being really cautious about using Zoom, now there are more protections and steps. You can give people passwords, and they can only enter the meeting if they have that password. And so there are ways that you can still have privacy with Zoom. But like I said, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, those are also other platforms that some school districts are using. So another don't is don't keep your microphone on when you're just listening, because it's going to pick up all that background noise. And so usually, depending on the platform, there'll be a little microphone icon like at the bottom, and it will have a red, like no mark through it. And that means your microphone is muted. And then what you have to remember is when you start talking, you have to unmute your microphone, right? But that helps. It also helps cut down on all the noise that can happen with, several people being online at the same time. So that's a good tip, is to turn your microphone off and then unmute it when you want to talk. So anybody else have another techie tip before we go on? Our next area that we're going to talk about is how to prepare for online IEP meetings. So let me see if you have any other tips about the tech part. And we will go on to Meeting prep do's and don'ts. Do ask to receive a draft IEP at least a few days before your online meeting. So a lot of what we're talking about today are when you have your annual meeting, your annual review meeting. If that comes up in the fall, or I'm sorry, in the spring, that's the meeting that you still want to have happening now. And so if it is an annual review meeting, you're going to be looking at a new IEP, right? So you want, just like you do for any other IEP meeting, you want to ask for that draft ahead of time. You want to have time to digest it, highlight it, write in questions that you want to ask. So that kind of prep for your online meeting is like really important that you still do that step. The other thing to look at is gathering all your paperwork, right? So you want a copy of your child's current IEP with you right there when you're at the meeting. You want the draft IEP. And if you have recent progress reports, I think all of those are really good to use during your online meeting, because one of the things that you want to be doing is possibly looking at whatever that third quarter progress report was for your child and using that as new baseline information for what your child was doing when, in March, when your child's schools closed down. Because another thing that we're going to be talking about is the data, and we'll make it simple for you, but we do need you to be documenting some things. So looking at your third quarter progress report is really important. If school closed before the third quarter progress reports were issued, you could still ask for the teacher for an update on what your child's progress in their last prompts, that they did with your child to measure goals, because that would give you some baseline information that you could use. So that would be really helpful. So have those documents with you. So when you're on the meeting online, you need to be at like a table or some place where you can have something spread out and you can easily grab what you need to get when you're, when the conversation is going on. The other thing for online meetings, just like regular meetings, invite somebody to come with you. You still need that emotional support. It's really helpful to have somebody else there, maybe taking notes, or that friend, being in charge of recording the meeting. But to have somebody with you is, I don't know, maybe even more important when you have online meetings. The other thing is when you're looking at all these little pictures of the people on the meeting, your friend, your partner, your advocate can also be looking at those people and picking up cues too. So you don't feel like you have to do all of that yourself. All you have to do is, like with a typical IEP meeting, you invite somebody to be there. So they would need to know the link to sign on for the call. You can talk to the special teacher ahead of time and let them know who else is to be on the call. And so they also get included, and if they need a password, they get that. But usually the basic invitation that they're going to send you for the meeting with the link to click on to join the meeting is the same link that your friend, your partner, your advocate would need to join the meeting too. So make sure you bring somebody with you. It's helpful. So when you look at yourself getting ready for IEP meetings, what are some of the tips that you have? What helps you get ready for IEP meetings? And I'm going to look over here in the comments. The other thing I wanted to tell you guys is if you type the word online in the chat box, I will be sending out a checklist that you could use for your online IEP meetings. And sometimes just having that checklist is a nice thing that you can go through and make sure you're not forgetting things. So if you want that checklist, type the word online in the chat box and we will get that for you. And let's see. Anne Marie says, in a current draft where it states to make sure you see what the team has. Yes, you want that draft is really important. And so for sure you want to be getting that. And Daisy says, reviewing progress reports and present levels of academic performance. You want that to definitely be part of the agenda for your IEP meeting. And that will be really helpful. So, yes. Okay, we got people saying online. Hey, Sandra. Denise is here with us. We have lots of friends. Corey. Bloom Designs Online. So is that the platform that your district is using? I'm not familiar with that. And Corey, have you had any online meetings yet? Because I know you've been busy with the school staff there. So let us know. So Corey, if you can type in the word online. And here is an old, not an old friend, but a friend from previous life, right? Helka, she used to be a music teacher. She says, you rock, girl. Bless you for your activism and advocacy. You are wonderful. And Helka, she had my kiddos when I was a special ed teacher and was the music teacher and always did a rocking job with the kids. So, yeah, and then this is another great idea, is to bring footage of progress. This is probably one of the easiest ways for parents to collect formal data, is to do some videotaping of your child. So if you haven't done that yet, start. Because you want to capture what your child is doing at this time in April. And then I would say almost every couple of weeks, I would do some more videotaping of how your child is doing. You want to show documentation of what's working, because then it's like, yes, we want to make sure we do this when school starts again. Or you'll learn like what's bombing and not working. And it's like, no, we don't want to try this approach again. And having that video documentation of how your child's skills are, over time while schools are closed is going to help you if you want to request an IEP meeting to talk about extended school year. If you want to request an IEP meeting to talk about compensatory education. So that documentation is going to be really necessary. And also, I'm going to be doing a separate live show coming up soon about data collection and easy ways that parents can do it. Because that really is going to be critical, or just jotting down things that you observe, right? All of that documentation is going to be really helpful. Corey's tip is ask about informal ways to assess performance in May via telehealth or online. Yeah, and Corey, I was thinking of that to me, depending on what your child's IEP goals are, there could be some IEP goals that your child could be on a Zoom or a Google Hangout meeting with the teacher. I'm just thinking of real simple things like, if your child has a goal for sight words, the teacher could show the child the flashcard. The child could say the word, the teacher could record, if they mispronounced it or whatever. So that would be, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Because it's online, but you have some way to show that the teacher is actually doing this progress monitoring. And then, depending on your schedule for how often, the progress monitoring is going to happen, if it's every couple of weeks, then every couple of weeks, the teacher and your child gets on for a face-to-face, online meeting, and they go through those sight word cards again, and the teacher can take notes. So there are ways that the teacher can do some informal assessment right online. You don't have to wait until your child can be there in person, right? As far as formal assessments, there are some testing companies that are allowing teachers to, administer the test, virtually. I would be really cautious about giving permission for virtual testing. I don't know. I'm just not sure that they're going to be as valid and reliable. And then it's like, we're not going to really trust the results, and we're going to have to redo it sometime in the fall. So as far as formal evaluations, my suggestion is that you would wait till the fall when your child could be there in person, and not do that. But informally, there's a lot that can happen, right? Carolyn says, bring progress from outside sources. Yes, yes, yes. Like art, computer, or dance class. Instructors can talk about character, class participation, etc. I love this idea. Yes, because you have rich sources of information. Sometimes parents feel like, oh, I don't have as much to contribute, but you do. And so if there are other people that know your child, if there are relatives that spend time with your child, invite them to at least be part of your online meeting and give their feedback on what they see with your child. If they're doing any other kinds of online classes, have the dance teacher be a part of your IEP meeting. All of those sources of information really give a better picture of your child versus just looking at what we typically do as teachers to, assess what kids' skills are. So you guys have such great suggestions. I love it. I love it. And I'll be adding these to the checklist because that's also important that we capture all these ideas. So here's some things not to forget about when you're prepping is don't forget that you still want to write your parent input statement. You still want to jot down questions that you have. If it's an annual review, and you're developing a new IEP, you still want to make sure that those, strengths, those visions, those concerns that you have for your child are captured in the IEP. Just like any other IEP meeting, I think it's really helpful for parents to actually email the teacher their input and have the teacher copy and paste it right into the IEP document. I really don't suggest doing attachments like see parent input that's attached, because those attachments have a way of getting lost. And I want to make sure your input is actually embedded in that IEP document. So whenever anybody pulls up the IEP document, they can see your input right there. And Anne-Marie was saying, yes, that she's hoping her daughter's ballet teacher will participate since she has direct knowledge of how Amanda interacts with her typical peers. Great idea. Yeah, one time I had a parent invite the piano teacher to an IEP meeting. And it was like, why would you invite the piano teacher? Well, the parent had been requesting an IEP goal for her son to learn keyboarding skills. And the occupational therapist kept giving her pushback. It's like, no, your son's fingers are too small. They're too short. He's not going to be able to play a piano. And it was like, what? He's taking piano lessons. I think he can also do keyboarding. So she had the private piano teacher come and say, this is how well he does on the piano. Certainly he can do this on the keyboard too. So always be thinking about other people that have these insights to your kids, and have them, if they can't stay for the whole meeting, at least come for part of the meeting to give their input. That's always really helpful. Don't assume you know what's on the agenda. Ask for it ahead of time. As an advocate, I work with a lot of families in different states. And one of the things that I always want to ask about is I want to see the invitation to the IEP meeting, because that invitation gives you a lot of good ideas. It will say the purpose of the meeting. It will say usually the roles of the people that were invited, like special ed teacher, director. A lot of times they don't list the teachers' names or the staff names. But the other thing that you want to get, besides looking at that written invitation for the meeting, is you want to get an agenda. I think some people are thinking, because this is this virtual online meeting, we have to really hurry it up, or we have to skip over things, or we don't have enough time to do it. And that's not true. Even though your meeting is virtually, you still need to do a good job with each section of that IEP. And you want to be prepared with each section of that IEP and questions that you want to ask. So prepare your input statement, prepare questions that you also want to ask during the IEP meeting. Then also figuring out who's going to attend. This invitation that I got the other day for a meeting had all these people as optional, and it was like, what? And so that's the other thing, is this is still an IEP meeting. You still have those same required people to be there. And so you want to make sure that they've been invited and that they will be there, because otherwise, if you have, an IEP team without a general ed teacher, you really want to seriously consider giving that teacher an excusal. I think even on the virtual IEP meetings, we want to have a full team there. And yes, things are different now, but guess what? People are still getting paid for their jobs, and they need to be able to take a chunk of their time and attend IEP meetings with families. So I would really be pretty strong about knowing who's coming and to make sure we've got everybody that we really need there. So let's see. What other meeting prep tips can you share with us? How do you get ready for meetings? What do you do? And also, if you just joined us, you can type the word online in the chat box, and I'll be sending out a checklist that I made for online IEP meetings, and it will go through these same sections with some additional tips about, what to do with the tech part of it, how to prepare for the meeting, what to do during a virtual meeting, and how you follow up after you've had that online meeting. So just type the word online in the chat box, and you will get that in the email. So let me check our comments. So a question, general ed, not special teachers, right? So yes, there should be a general ed classroom teacher. If there's a music, art, PE teacher or something that knows your child, and you would also like them to be on the virtual IEP meeting, as a parent, you could ask for those people to also be there. Whether or not they're going to be, available is another question. But for sure, a general ed classroom teacher that knows the grade level curriculum needs to be there. Caroline, listen to recording from previous meeting. Oh, there you go. To go over any questions from last meeting. Yes, what a good idea that is. And so her tip is, when you're preparing and you've got that recording from the last meeting, go ahead and re-listen to that. And that can jog your memory, like, oh yeah, we were supposed to have that done before the next meeting, or we were going to try this out. So yeah, that's a great tip. And like I said, I use Otter.ai now to record meetings, and it also generates a free transcript. So if what I like to do is re-listen to the meeting, but also read along with the transcript, or just read the transcript. And if there's something I'm not too clear on, I can click with Otter.ai and go back and listen to that part of the conversation too. But that's a great tip. I'm going to put that on my list. I like getting these ideas from you guys. Thanks. Thank you. What else? So let's look at what we're going to do during this online meeting. So during the meetings, do's and don'ts. Do ask people to speak one at a time. And if there is no video, if you're doing it just like as a phone conference, also have everyone say their name before they speak. And this may sound like, I don't know, like, geez, how bossy can you get? But especially when you're recording meetings, and you probably have observed this from when you're in person meetings, when there's these side conversations, when people interrupt each other, it's really hard to get a good, clear recording. And therefore, then it's hard to get a good, clear transcript. And it especially, I think, virtually, because we're not there face to face. It's a little bit trickier as far as, when you're face to face, you can see when somebody stopped talking, and, you can talk. I think on online meetings, it's harder not to like talk over each other, or both of you start to say something at the same time. And especially if it's just a phone conference and there's no video, then you really want people to say, this is Charmaine, so-and-so's advocate, or this is, Nancy, the general ed teacher. So then when you're going back to the recording, when you're going back to look at a transcript, it's real easy to see who was saying what when. So that really helps. So for review eligibility meetings, those typical IEP meetings that you might have scheduled in the springtime, again, don't rush through it. You still want to go step by step into that sequence that your IEP form has. And I just think, so many times we think like, we got to get to talking about, the service hours and what that's going to look like. No, we still want to talk about the student strengths, how those strengths can be embedded into goals and accommodations. We still want to talk about, annual goals, and based on what needs and what priorities. And, so we don't want to be rushed. Just because it's a virtual meeting doesn't mean it's going to be this rushed. You still want to take time to go through everything. The other thing to think about, and this is true for any IEP meeting, is to consider requesting training for the staff or for yourself. Training is a related service. A lot of times people don't ask for it, but you could ask for some parent training on using technology. So when your teacher, says, here's this QR code, take a picture of it, go to this website, click on this and do this audiobook. It's like, what? So it could be a simple, I don't know, half-hour meeting or something with the teacher online to go through, like, how do I access all these things? You keep giving me all these ideas for my child. I'm not sure how to do it. And it's not just technology, but it could be other like worksheet packets that are happening, right? And it's like, I'm not sure, they're not coming home with any accommodations or modifications. How am I supposed to do this? So asking for training for yourself, asking in the IEP meeting for training for staff so they can be more effective with their online lessons. All of that can happen. And you can look beyond this time for spring, right? Think about when school's going to be happening in the fall, what kind of staff training is going to be needed then? Are you looking at your child going from elementary school to middle school in the fall? Do you wonder what that staff at the middle school, if they know how to use the communication device that your child has? Be thinking ahead. We're going to be, talking in these virtual meetings about distance learning and what's happening right now. But if it's an annual review, we've got to be looking for the whole year what's going to be happening and what's going to be most important for your child in that IEP. So we can't lose sight of, like, even though things are real different now, we still need an IEP that can be in effect in the fall when your child is back at school, face to face with their teacher and their classmates. So let me know if you have any questions or comments. The other thing that I'm a little concerned that we might forget about is talking about the transition back to school and how is that going to be planned for. Because right now, right, most likely my prediction is that schools are going to be closed the rest of this school year. And so we don't have to worry about transition until the fall, but that's going to be a big transition for a lot of our kids. It's going to be months that they've been out of school, right? And so when you have your online meetings this spring, one of the things that I would like you to talk about is, what is transition going to look like for my child when school opens again? Now, you don't have to have it all figured out at this, first, IEP meeting that you might be having, but I still want you to mention it. I still want it to be on everybody's radar that we're going to have another virtual IEP meeting later, maybe in the summer, who knows, to talk about transition for next year. And if you get pushback because teachers aren't going to be on contract in the summer, then I would say, okay, then we need to look at something in May or, June, if your teachers are still working in June, and have that whole meeting just be about transitioning back to that, brick and mortar school, right? So Sandra asked about extended school year. And yeah, I was surprised. I was at a meeting in March before schools closed. And they, were talking about if schools closed for the springtime, then they would probably also be closed for ESY, and they would do virtual learning for extended school year. So contact your special ed teacher now. We have, one family where the school district was pretty much saying, no, they don't qualify for extended school year. And we're like, no, we can't assume that. We want to have a meeting about it. So we have a meeting scheduled in May just to talk about extended school year. So yeah, just like you might need a separate meeting to talk about transitioning back when school opens, you also might want to be having a separate meeting this spring just to talk about extended school year, and what that's going to look like. And you always have the ability and choice to say, I don't think that's going to work for us. Let's talk about how we can really individualize this. So this would be helpful for my child. Typically extended school years, if they're in person, it's lots of kids kind of thrown together in a class in some elementary school in the district, and the teacher that probably doesn't know them. And so that's really doesn't meet many kids' needs. So even without this pandemic, I always suggest that parents talk about individualizing those extended school year services. It might be a one-on-one tutor that could help your child a lot more. But you're also going to have to see, this summer, is the school going to be offering anything in person? Typically, a lot of schools have their extended school year in June. I'm thinking, why can't we do it in July? Because June might still be an iffy month if we can get together with people in person. So to me, one of the things that you could do is ask for extended school year to happen in July. And then maybe you have a better chance of getting some face-to-face time with your child and a teacher. So let's see. Lisa is asking tips on how to take data to make a case for compensatory services in the future. Yes, Lisa, and we're going to have an entire show on that because I want to show you and give you some examples of really easy ways. But some of the quick and dirty ways that you can do it right now is take videos of your child working. If they have packets that are being sent home for distance learning, videotape it where your child is doing it, but you also want to get the camera so you can videotape what the actual worksheet looks like. And you can see if there's any accommodations or if it's the same worksheet that got sent home with everybody. And I would suggest, if you can, every couple weeks to take another video of your child. The other thing to be looking for, and you can use a variety of ways. Some students have agendas from school, they're a planner, and that's where kids have to write their homework in every day. You can use your child's planner and write down daily kinds of notes about what they worked on, what was hard for them, what was easy. So just your observations can be such rich information too. But we will, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a show just all about taking data the easy way for parents. So that would be helpful, and we'll let you know about that. So we have Naomi. She says, for transition from elementary to middle, teachers from middle school should participate in the IEP meeting. Yes, yes, yes. Just like any other transition meeting, and especially when your kids are going from elementary to middle or from middle to high school, you want to have that staff that's going to be receiving your child to also be on that transition meeting. So thanks for bringing that up. That's really an important point. And that's why you want to get like the written invitation and see, has the middle been invited? And if they haven't, I would want to probably reschedule until both elementary and middle school staff can be there. Otherwise, then you're going to have a separate meeting with just the middle school staff. And so, yeah, I would try and get everybody there at the same time. So Lisa says, thank you. She's looking forward to it. Daisy, if you are using Seesaw class, oh, there you go. It has a calendar option and you can see what was posted in your child's journey by day. See, how cool is that? So yeah, Seesaw, I've heard, is a platform that a lot of teachers are using. We're helping homeschool our 4 grandchildren. And their teachers have just been using Zoom. And then giving hard copies of packets to do. But yeah, see, like all of that stuff, think of it, of where you can find information and use that. And what you want to do is start, I don't know if you can, with Seesaw, Daisy, if you can tell us, can you print out, the calendar, or you could just screenshot it, print out. But as much as you can keep up with that collection and that documentation every week versus coming to the end of summer and going, wow, I think my kid really regressed. I'm going to ask for comp ed. And then it's like, oh no, all those things were erased that I could have used online. So start capturing that information week by week now. And just do the best you can, right? I mean, we have a lot of things going on, and documentation you like on the back burner, but you do want to try and pick up some things throughout the summer, throughout the spring for documentation. Daisy says she hasn't found a print option. So what I would do, Daisy, is maybe just do a screenshot and capture it that way so it doesn't, disappear and you don't have that. Rochelle says, all students are experiencing special education with distance learning. Good time for innovation, collaboration, creativity, and leadership from a friend. Yeah, I mean, this could be seen as a wonderful opportunity. I know I've said it on previous shows, but I mean, I don't think we can assume that all kids are going to regress. Your child may be doing better now than they were in school. And we want to figure out why they may be doing better now than when they were in school. Because we want to take that information and then see, is there a way to replicate that? I mean, one of the things that I've noticed with my grandkids homeschooling is if they're hungry, they don't do so well. And if math is a harder subject for them and you're asking them to do their math work and it's been a while since they've eaten a meal or a snack, I figured out I better offer them a snack before I say, let's do your math work. So that can be replicated in the school year. You can say before these, non-preferred tasks happen, let's make sure my child has a sensory break. Let's make sure they have a snack break, whatever. So those little things that you're noticing, that is so great. And you want to be able to capture that and share it with the staff. So I see this as a really possible way for you to feel more connected with your child and more connected with what kind of work they're doing. I had another mom say, I had no idea this was the reading program they were using. And it's like coming home with no modifications. I don't get it. All they're doing is sending the general ed classroom, work home. And it's like, what? But she's also learning, like, instead of trying to do this reading program the way these worksheets say it, I've been doing it this way with my child. And guess what? The light bulb went on and he is doing so much better. So you guys, we can't assume that our kids are going to regress. There's going to be a lot of kids that either are doing well maintaining distance learning with at home and being in a comfortable situation. And there's going to be kids that make progress with this distance learning option that we have right now. And we know there's going to be some of our kids that do regress, some of our kids that are going to lose skills. And that's why we want that documentation. So when we come to a meeting and ask about compensatory ed, we do have data, documentation, observations, videos to show the amount of regression that has happened. So, hey, Marla. Marla says, I think this is a great opportunity to change the way our children learn. I think schools want our feedback. Exactly. And that, like, I have this whole list of trainings that I want to do. And besides data collection, the other one that I want to talk about is multiple types of intelligence, multiple intelligences. And as a parent working with your child now at home, you can pick up so much good information about, yes, we've heard that they're a visual learner, but what does that really mean? Does it mean that a visual schedule instead of just, icon pictures, we can do that visual schedule with a picture and a word? Does it mean if we have a photograph of the next activity, my child is so much better with that kind of a visual schedule? So you're going to have ideas that you can take back to meetings. And I think you're going to have so much input for things like accommodations, because you're going to be learning what kinds of accommodations really work with your child, at least in this setting, right? And then you can talk with the IEP team and say, let's look, can this be replicated in the school setting? How is this going to happen? We've learned so much from, working with our child. How do we make sure that we can use this now? Say, we really want to individualize. We really want to, tap into how they learn best when we're picking out math curriculum, when we're doing reading lessons or things like that with our kids. Amy, she said, yes, been saying proactive breaks make things so much easier, and we can avoid the reactive break when they reach frustration levels for escape or avoidance. Yeah, I think that's so true, Amy. And so the little things that you're noticing at home, and you're noticing some signs and some triggers before your child has that meltdown, those are the things that you want to share with the staff when you have your IEP meetings, because you also want the staff, when school opens, to be able to be more proactive instead of reactive, and giving kids a break when, it's kind of too late. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. So thank you for your input. You guys are doing so good. I love it. I have a few more do's and don'ts. So let's go back there and we can do some more. What other things help you get ready or help you have meetings that go smoother? So be sure to type those in. This is the ideal. This is the ideal IEP meeting, isn't it? Too bad we can't have this in our social distancing, but it says this is the best meeting we've ever had. Team members find fun ways to facilitate their meetings. So I know maybe you can't do this now with your virtual IEP meeting, or you could all be in a hot tub and have your virtual meeting. But hopefully when school opens again and you have these face-to-face meetings with your staff, you have some good laughs, you have some good memories to share, and you have even built stronger relationships with your staff through all of this distance learning stuff too. I really don't suggest that you excuse anybody from your meetings without really serious consideration. And this is advice that I give families when I'm working with them as an advocate too. We really want the team to be there. And yes, it's a different time. And yes, teachers are home and they have their kids, but you have your kids and you're trying to figure out how to do an online meeting. And the teachers are still being paid, so they need to figure out a way that they can be there too. And I mean, we want to be, giving people grace and understanding, but the reality is school is still going on. Your child still deserves to have, a full team there, making plans and talking about successes and things that might need to be tweaked a little. Don't make quick decisions that you'll regret later. Schedule another meeting. This is like any other IEP meeting. If you don't get it all done in that first online meeting, just set up another date. Do not feel rushed. Do not waive your rights. So let's look at this. Here's another Michael Giangreco cartoon. There's a guy in a rowboat. There's a mermaid out there. And the mermaid is saying, come this way. It's a series, 1, 2, 3. And the man in the rowboat is saying, that sounds so good. But don't be seduced. Just because it looks good at first glance doesn't mean it's the right solution. So how many of you have been offered to participate in writing a distance learning plan for your child? Have you guys had any of those yet? Or some school districts are writing the distant learning plan and just sending it to the parent without really getting input. one of the things that you want to be really careful about is the language on that distant learning plan, because you don't want to be waiving any of your rights or your child's rights. So let's look at some potential language that you could use. So this is from a national organization that I belong to, the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. And their suggestion, and let's see, is to use something like this, where you say, I do not waive any rights to challenge the educational services being offered during the closure of schools due to the pandemic. Once school resumes, there's an expectation that services previously provided resume. So there's some other statements that other advocates and other people have been suggesting. You just want to, with any kinds of templates or any kind of suggested language, I think you always want to tailor it to your situation, your child's, needs and what they have to do. But you want to be really careful that you're not waiving any of your rights. Rochelle asked if we can have a copy of this. Yes. So if you type online in the chat box, I will be emailing out your checklist for your online meetings. I will be emailing out this statement from COPA and some other groups as far as language that you can use. So especially if you're not on my email list now, if you can type the word online in the chat box, and I'll make sure that that gets emailed out to you. So thanks for asking about that. So Sandra's from Pennsylvania, and she said, we received an emergency no rep, and that's it's like Pennsylvania's prior written notice. And so Sandra, so yeah, it'd be interesting. What kind of language did they use in that? And how did they describe the services that your child may be getting through a distant learning plan? How you got to make sure that whatever the IEP says, those are the services that are going to be started up again once the fall comes. So let me see. We have a few more here. The other advice from the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates is to request that your concerns be included in the prior written notice. And if for some reason that's not done, then you need to submit your concerns and your objections to anything in a written letter to the school. The other thing that's always good to do is when you submit any kind of a letter is to say, please, put this in my child's, educational records or their permanent file. You want to make sure that what you're giving them, you want that to be kept in your child's file for other people to be able to see, for you to go back and reference. Always important, after your meeting, you'll probably get your prior written notice emailed to you, because you're not there where they can print it out and they can hand it to you. You always want to review if you have any meeting minutes that are taken, that they're accurate, and you always want to review what your prior written notice says too. And if it's not accurate, you want to reply and say, this is not my understanding of the discussion from the meeting, and you talk about, how the record needs to be corrected, and you've got to make that as a specific request too. So what other things have helped you have meetings go smoother? And we're going to do follow-ups, do's and don'ts. After the IEP meeting, make sure you have a conversation with the staff. Celebrate successes. Make adjustments if needed. So many times we forget to talk about things that are going well. So in your distance learning, if things are going well, you want to make sure that you note those too, and that you thank staff, that you celebrate your child having these successes. And if there's things that need to be tweaked with your distant learning plan, please do that. Do not just keep letting it go. You need to have a conversation and you need to follow up about things like that. Document. We've talked about this a lot, taking videos, jotting down what you notice when you're working with your child. And know if you have disagreements, you can still use dispute resolution. So even though, we're doing all these things virtually, if you want to file a state complaint, even during the school closure time, you can file a state complaint. If you want to ask for a facilitated IEP meeting, you can still ask for that. So don't think because we're in this virtual reality now that you can't use your dispute resolution options. You most certainly can. You could ask for mediation. You could file for due process. Of course, all of these things would happen virtually, right? And there might be some timeline extensions or whatever, but you can still use your typical dispute resolution options. So don't forget about those. What other follow-up tips do you have for when you're done with a meeting? What are some of the typical things that you do for follow-up? Some don'ts. Don't forget to thank the members. Like lots of people, teachers hear more when parents are upset and don't get to hear the positive things. So as a retired teacher, I know that to be true. You appreciate when people recognize the good work that you do as a parent. And we also want to recognize the hard work that teachers are putting in, especially this is like a crazy time. I've talked to some teachers and it's like, this is much harder than teaching kids in my classroom. So teachers are frustrated. Teachers would love to have your kids back in the classroom too. So remember to take some time to thank the people that are behind the scenes doing all this work. And don't think that you can't request another IEP meeting. And we've talked a little bit about this. If you want to request a separate meeting to talk about extended school year, if you want to request a separate meeting to talk about transition when school opens and what that transition planning for that, what that's going to look like, you can ask for additional IEP meetings this spring. Track the services that your child is receiving, track the services that they're missing. That's going to be part of your documentation. What other things do you like to do after an IEP meeting? I know some parents will write like a summary of the IEP meeting and have that as kind of almost like their meeting notes. Depending on the amount of time and effort that you can put into all of this, right? Because you're doing lots of other things now. Just make sure, I think, that you touch base with people afterwards, especially if you haven't, received a copy of the final IEP. Just say, I know things are really busy and hectic. It's been a week and I haven't received the final copy yet. Can you please make sure I get that in the next 3 to 5 days? So at least have a follow-up conversation like that with the staff. So we've covered a lot of run over you. I try to do these as hour-long sessions, but that's okay because we have some great input. I'm going to be including your ideas in my checklist. Again, if you want to receive that, just make sure that you type the word online in the chat box, and I will email you out your checklist. I will email you out suggested language from different advocacy groups about what you can use in your distant learning plan, so you make sure that you don't waive any of your rights. If you are a Trailblazer, that's our monthly membership group, tonight we have a session and we're going to go deep, deep, deep into distant learning plans and even open that up more and talk about some more details with that. So if you're not a Trailblazer and you would like information about our membership, just let me know and I can always send you that information. I was going to have another live session today with an attorney from Hawaii that recently has filed a lawsuit against the Department of Education in Hawaii around compensatory education. Unfortunately, he has a IEP meeting this afternoon, so he's going to be on his own virtual IEP meeting, and so we're going to be rescheduling that for next week. That is something that is really interesting. I'm not totally sure I understand it all, so I want to ask some clarifying questions from the attorney, Keith Peck. But that is going to be another really good show that you want to be here for when we talk about compensatory education. So we've got lots of new things coming down the pike. We're going to have a session about data collection. We'll have a session about compensatory education. It's nothing but lots of fun, right? So thank you guys so much for being here. I'm going to check and see if we have any other questions. If you think of questions afterwards, come back to this page and type them in. And I'm happy to answer those. And Maggie has one here. So let me put my glasses on. Maggie says, so here's the thing I'm struggling with during this COVID-19 lockdown. My daughter is definitely not getting the same education and level of service that she was getting during real school. But the school district seems to be trying. And we have lots of virtual meetings, therapy scheduled, almost too much, since my daughter doesn't really want to do them all. But honestly, I just don't know what else they could do to improve the situation, aside from sending people in real life to my house. And so I don't know if there was some more that you were going to put in there, Maggie. And I mean, amen, right? I mean, how many people are in this same situation as Maggie and her daughter, where people are really trying, but it's pretty much like this is not working, right? And so it is really challenging. And so one of the things that you can look at is how to prioritize what your daughter needs right now and what's most important. Because she may have, several IEP goals, and not all of those might be something that can easily be worked on with this distant learning plan. Or they may just not be as important right now. And so one of the things I think you could do is have a conversation with the IEP team and talk about how can we prioritize what's really going to be important. All of these online therapies are really difficult for my daughter to, be engaged in. I'm not sure that they're really worth the time that we're trying. The thing that you want to be careful about is you want to be careful about saying, I don't want these services that you're offered. And then later you come back and say, I want comp ed. Because I think, depending on what you're going to have to do, how high up you're going to have to go when you're asking for comp ed, if that's something you're considering, I think, if it comes to due process, hearing officers, I think are going to have a lot of empathy for schools, and especially if the school says, oh, we offered all these online therapies and the parents said no, it was too much, and so there's this fine line between letting them know that the current distant plan isn't really working for your daughter versus saying, I don't want this, So that's part of those are some of the topics that we really dive in our monthly membership group, the parent trailblazers. And also we can get into it as a more individualized case, because there's a lot of nuances. And then we can also look at suggested wording that we can give. And again, I'm not an attorney, I'm an advocate, but we can help you. So yeah, I think the thing is, Maggie, lots of people are right where you are, right? And people are trying so hard, and they need to hear that feedback from parents. If it's like thanks but no thanks, we need to try to change this. And maybe instead of having the online speech therapy, we look at other ways for your child to be able to work on language skills when it doesn't require that they be on an online lesson with a speech therapist or somebody. So thank you for your great questions. You guys are so wonderful. So here's to having your caffeine to get ready for your online IEP meetings. And here's to your maybe adult beverage of IEP recovery time. But thank you for being here. I am Charmaine Tanner. I host this weekly show. We will be back next Thursday with more goodness for you. So make sure you like the page Visions and Voices Together. You can sign up to get video reminders. And I wish you all to stay healthy, that your family and friends are healthy, and that we will see you back here next Thursday at noon Mountain Time. Bye, guys. Take care.